Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to start off with a review for the film Red 1, and in the second half, I'll be giving my thoughts on the movie Blitz. So as for Red 1, I really don't have much to say about this movie. It's a film that I kind of expected to be pretty bad going in. I didn't really like the trailer. I thought it looked pretty dumb. But I didn't realize it was going to be so mentally exhausting and taxing to watch. This is a new movie starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Chris Evans, and J.K. Simmons. They're all pretty entertaining actors, so I mean, really, you couldn't go too wrong there. And the movie's about Santa Claus getting kidnapped and sort of his bodyguard needing to rescue him before it's too late to save Christmas. And along comes this guy, random human, who, is kind of like a big naughty lister, as they call it, and he's kind of gotta, learn the spirit of Christmas and all that stuff. So, The Rock's movies are all one and the same. It's a predictable, generic action movie where his character is a protector of something, he beats people up, makes some jokes, and eventually learns something along the way. And they're usually pretty family friendly, nothing too edgy. Feels like something very mainstream that people can watch and turn their brain off for and enjoy. The problem is that his movies aren't usually very good. Jumanji is one of his better ones, the recent sort of spiritual sequels to the Robin Williams movies. Those are pretty entertaining, but stuff like Black Adam, Red Notice, not to be mistaken with Red 1, Skyscraper, Baywatch, Rampage, are all bad to mediocre films that have the same formula and are so forgettable. And, The Rock always gets the same filmmakers to do his movies. I'm assuming because, they're very accommodating to his needs and probably understanding of what the type of movie he wants to make. I'm sure they collaborate a lot on them. The Rock has his own production company behind the films. I'm sure he wants a lot of say in what happens. There are some stories when he was making Rampage, he didn't like the ending, so The Rock, had the power, I think, to kind of change the ending of that movie. And I also forgot about Jungle Cruise, another pretty average The Rock movie. Really, all his movies are one and the same, and Red 1 is no different. I found this movie actually to be rather painful to sit through, and it is one of his lower tier movies, but not without its moments. I will say not without its moments. And Jake Kasdan directs this film. He actually did both Jumanji movies with The Rock, and they're some of his better films. So, I mean, really, this shouldn't have been that bad. I've seen some people maybe saying people are being too harsh on this movie. I disagree. I think this movie is awful. But it really just has no life to it. It's a $250 million budget for this movie. And it looks like it cost at least half of that. I don't really know how they pulled that off, where all the money went, if it just went to the cast, but it looks so cheap. I mean, I kid you not, I've literally seen better visual effects in CW shows, better CGI in CW shows, like The Flash and Superman and Lois, those shows. Literally, this movie has these moments that look like something I would see on that network, and that is a really big criticism here. I cannot emphasize enough how many times I was just looking at the movie being how did this cost so much? Where did the money go? It's so ugly looking. It's one of the ugliest looking movies of the year for sure. If you thought The Flash, that movie, if you thought the CGI in The Flash looked outdated and bad, look at this movie, because this movie cost probably about as much, if not more, and looks even worse. But back to the movie, it tries to be like a Christmas movie meets Star Wars, sort of high-tech Christmas. We've seen some Christmas movies do this before, but this movie's really leaning into the sci-fi-ness of it. You have these creatures, in the North Pole that are doing stuff, and sort of the way the sled just sort of blasts off, kind of looks like like the Millennium Falcon going to hyperdrive or something. It has those effects to it, but the movie has no Christmas spirit and none of the fun and imagination in Star Wars. It's a lose-lose, and it's shocking a movie like this could feel so uninspired and dull. It's so lame. I don't know how they made it so lame. The action even is pretty pathetic. The choreography is so bad, and you can barely tell what's happening half the time because it's so quickly edited. It's very choppy. Not to mention the bad visual effects and it's also just very bad action in the sense that there's very little in the way of stakes. So it isn't even interesting to watch. Like, you'd think this scene with, like, these giant, snowman monsters that you see in the trailer, you would think that would be more interesting and more creative. But it's, like, the most bland action I've seen in a long time. And it's weird, too. It's just, like, the script doesn't even make sense. Like, you have these snowmen in, like, the warmest part of, like, the planet, and, like, they're not melting at all. Like, that's not a thing to them. Like, the movie just ignores logic to every degree. And if you're fine with that, maybe you'll have more fun with this movie than I did. I mean, I understand it's a Christmas movie. It's not really meant to be, like, the most, logistical movie out there. I totally get that. But you need at least, like, rules in your movie. You need some logic to carry the story forward. This movie has none of that. No logic, even less than Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, Deadpool and Wolverine looks like a very competent story compared to this. I don't know what they were doing here. And the script in here is terrible. It has no momentum, tons of plot holes, as I kind of mentioned, just no logic, no clarification on anything, no build-up, and a story that just goes nowhere a lot of the time. Literally my favorite scene in the movie, or one of my favorite scenes in the movie, is one that does absolutely nothing to move the story forward. And that's a very bad sign. You should not have good scenes serve no purpose, because literally, like, whenever that happens in the movie, that's just saying, like, you do not know what your story is, you don't know how to move things forward. I will say the scene at least slightly moved the characters forward a little bit, but it also was just so long and didn't really serve a purpose, so really just terrible screenwriting. And the villain in this film is also very bad. They have very little in the way of development or motive beyond your typical doing bad things for control and power spiel. I really could not care less about them every time the movie cut to them. And it's really just like, I don't know. I mean, the villains in the Rock movies are never that memorable, but this is like, just like F-tier villain. Like, this is just like a villain who has literally nothing interesting about them, and just has no development, very, not even fun, like, acting. I mean, I have to say, like, the most interesting thing the villain does is do something with Nick Kroll, the actor Nick Kroll, who I think is pretty funny. In this movie, he gives this performance that I don't know if he deserves an Oscar or a Razzie for, because it's so memorable and so funny, but I don't know what to make of it. I mean, look, if you're seeing the movie, at least you get that out of it. I will say, like, that is probably one of the best moments in the movie. What Nick Kroll does, he's so funny in this, but I don't know if it was a good or bad scene or not. But like, for the most part, besides him, really, everyone in this movie feels like they're phoning it in for a paycheck. Chris Evans is usually a very charming and funny actor in a lot of things he's done. I mean, he, at least his good movies, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, all the, Avengers stuff with Captain America, Knives Out. He's very good in those. Even in Lightyear, I would say, like, Chris Evans actually really feels like he's trying, but he's just neither charming or funny here. He just plays this character who, has very, lame traits. He's not anything special, and just, I don't know, it's a very forgettable character. I don't really think Chris Evans adds much to this movie. The Rock just plays himself again as usual and doesn't have very good chemistry with Evans. It's just, I don't know, J.K. Simmons is at least kind of decent. Really the best dynamic in the movie is between The Rock and J.K. Simmons and the scenes they do share together, but they barely interact throughout the whole movie. So it's like just these little small moments that actually kind of work. And that's this movie in general. I mean, like, the actual only good parts of this movie, like the really good parts, are very few and far between, and just filled with this very bad movie in between them. And my only real positives with the film are that there are a few unintentionally hilarious scenes that, I mean, they really are funny, just at how bad they are. I mean, you do have a few good scenes, as I mentioned. You have a few scenes that actually do kind of try, and those are pretty good. The prosthetics and makeup are good when the movie chooses to avoid CGI. Like, there's a lot of bad CGI, but, there's Krampus, if you saw the trailer, he's in this movie, and the makeup on him is pretty impressive. I really liked what they did with him. And there's just a nice message in here about being a good person. If you've seen any Christmas movie ever, that's what you get. But this movie has something, I guess, a little different to say about just kind of the world and how, maybe there's a little more, it feels like there's more naughty people out there than ever, but there's always, like, a reason to be good and try to be better. And there's stuff like that in this movie, about good and bad people. And I think it at least is something a little different than what I've seen before. So I'll give the movie credit for that. I'll give credit where it's due. It tries. That's really the only good thing the script does, though. I'm literally struggling to even find those good things in the movie. Like, it's a movie that I literally, like, have to really think, what did I like about it? Like, it's, like, unironically, what did I like about it? Because, like, it's so bad and it's boring. I mean, it's a really boring movie. The movie's, like, 2 hours long. I felt like I was in the theater for 3 hours. I kid you not. Like, as soon as the credits started rolling, I got up and I was, like, ready to leave. Like, I didn't even care. I wasn't waiting. I mean, there wasn't anything after the credits, like, so I didn't have anything to wait for. But, like, sometimes I'll just like to, like, process the moment after the movie ends and, take a beat before I get up. No, like, after this movie ended, I was like, I'm out. I'm ready to go. So, I don't know. It's a really lame movie. I was, like, dying to get the bad taste out of my mouth. I literally had to watch something else immediately after it ended to just get it out of my head. Don't see this movie. Save yourself 2 hours and $15. Even on TV, it's not a movie I can recommend. If you're a big fan of these actors, you're the only person I can say should give it a shot. Because look, audiences have spoken. They think this movie's pretty fine. If you like The Rock's movies, you enjoyed movies I mentioned before, like Red Notice and Jungle Cruise and Rampage, and you think those are pretty good movies, you have a good time with those, maybe you'll get a good time out of this one too. I'm not saying you won't. I'm just saying, for me, as someone who just never really found those movies very good at all in the first place, I was already probably not going to think this movie was very good, but I was at least hoping it would be okay. Like, I wasn't expecting it to be this bad. And this is also just the kind of movie that makes me very sad about the state of film in general. Like, I love the movie Nora. I was raving about it a few weeks ago. That movie cost $6 million. Like, and, $6 million, it's a lot of money. But you can make a Nora over 40 times over. Again, 40 times over. And still not cost as much as this movie. And, if that movie isn't big enough for you, let's look at Oppenheimer. Best Picture last year, made almost $1 billion. You can make that movie twice over and still cost less than Red One. And look at Oppenheimer. That's a great movie. It's big. It's grand. It's 3 hours. It's not, like, heavy on action, but it has a lot happening in the movie. And look, I know these are very different types of movies. It's just ridiculous that for $250 million, this is what we get. We get a subpar Christmas movie that has no magic to it. It has no Christmas spirit, no holiday spirit, no magic. It barely feels like a Christmas movie. It doesn't even really get the Star Wars-y sci-fi part right. It's just a lose-lose on every level, this movie. I don't like it. I'm exhausted talking about it. I really can't recommend it unless you know who you are and you enjoy The Rock's movies. Maybe then give it a shot. Otherwise, you can move on. So I'm going to give this movie a D+. I could go lower, but it really has a few things I'll give it credit for. Like, again, pretty nice message about being a good person. Prosthetics are worth mentioning, and it's at least unintentionally funny in a few areas, besides the few actual decent scenes in this film. So I'll give it a D+. Not that I'm raving over it, but, it's not the worst thing out there, I guess. And alright, let's move on to Blitz. I always love when a streaming movie comes to theaters. I'm someone who just doesn't like watching movies on TV as much. Not that there's anything wrong with watching a movie on TV, it's perfectly enjoyable. I have a nice setup at home with, like some speakers and a pretty large screen, so, I have nothing to complain about watching on TV. But it's just not the same as going to the theater and watching a movie and getting, just the lights down and getting, some big sound on the speakers there, like better than I can get at home. A very big screen, comfy reclining seats. Just like all that stuff really makes the movie going experience worth it. And, having a nice audience to watch it with too, seeing their reactions. Look, if I can choose to watch a movie in a theater versus on TV, I will choose the theater in a heartbeat. And that's what I did here. I got to see this movie Blitz in theaters. It'll be on Apple TV Plus on November 22nd, but I got to see it a little early in theaters, and that was pretty exciting. I was actually pretty excited for this movie. It's by writer and director Steve McQueen. He did some really great movies like 12 Years a Slave. And this film is set during World War II when bombs were getting dropped in London. It killed a lot of people, destroyed a lot of their homes, and left a lot of kids separated from their families. It's a really tragic time in the world, and this movie just kind of takes a look at that and takes a look at a perspective of a mother who sends her young boy away to get him safe from the bombings and, sends him far out of sight and kind of has to separate them. But when the boy decides he wants to go back home, he kind of goes on this perilous journey where he meets a lot of people, showcasing the best and worst humanity has to offer. And I had a lot of faith going into this film because of really just the people involved. I mean, besides Steve McQueen, it has the director of photography of Little Women. That's a really great looking film. It has Hans Zimmer doing the score, who is my favorite composer. And I'll see any movie really just because he's doing the music. Like, he's one of those people who, sometimes people have an actor, like if you see like Tom Hanks is in a movie, you'll go watch a movie just because Tom Hanks is in it. That's me with Hans Zimmer. I'll go literally watch a movie just because he's doing the score. And it has Saoirse Ronan as one of the leads. She's a great actress, also in Little Women and Lady Bird, some really great films. She's an awesome actor. And really, to say I was disappointed coming out of this movie would be an understatement, because it's a film that's jam-packed with potential. I mean, I've mentioned a lot of things that really do sound enticing. And the film even gets far enough to have these moments of greatness and brilliance. But it's a film where the whole isn't greater than the sum of its parts, if you know what I mean. The film starts off excellently, and terrifyingly, I might add. It shows the up-close effects of these bombings. You see people getting hurt and terrified. It's loud and intense, especially in the theater. I mean, I think this was like really when the theater experience like made a difference. I mean, you have this like loud sound of like the bombings. It's really scary. And a few scenes are like this, and they play out like a horror movie a lot of the time, where it's like really just like things just jump out. Like it's really like you can kind of feel the terror these people might be experiencing in this time. These scenes are just some of the best in the film, and they communicate why this is such a dangerous and scary time for people. It made me scared just watching it. These scenes are just so epic and grand in scale. You kind of feel like you're there. These scenes really put you in the middle of the action. And I say that in the best and worst way possible because, best, it's like, it really is immersive, but, bad because it's just so scary. And these scenes just look amazing. Great visuals and cinematography, beautifully made scenes, also excellent sound design that pulls you in, makes these scenes all the more impactful to your senses and really just immerses you in the moment. And there's another great scene I want to mention that involves a dance club and what happens in it. It's a pretty impactful scene that took me by surprise. Just kind of, you get a nice like one long oneer where you're just walking around with this guy around the dance club, and then what kind of happens is just really, one of those moves that just kind of like puts you in silence and just, leaves you with your jaw dropping, like, oh man, this is what's happening here. So these were all really good scenes, and these moments are great. But then you get to the story, which isn't nearly as compelling as it should have been. I mean, there's really no easy way to say it. It just, it very quickly separates the leads in Saoirse Ronan and Elliot Heffernan. And you can just instantly feel a drop-off in quality once they're apart. Like, when you see them together in the beginning of the movie, you feel like a nice connection there, and you can really feel like, oh, like, if they get separated, this would really be impactful. But the moment they're apart, the movie just feels like it kind of loses its way to me, like, and it's a movie that's telling two stories at that point, two different stories, and I'd really only argue one of them is interesting. You see Saoirse Ronan play this mother, Rita, who is simply trying to live a normal life during wartime. And it's fine, but it doesn't really go anywhere for a large portion of the movie, in my opinion. The flashbacks are good, though, with her character. And Elliot Heffernan plays Rita's son, George. And he's trying to make his way back home, and it's pretty hit or miss depending on where he is and who he's interacting with. You know, he interacts with a lot of side characters. Some are interesting, others are not. And it just doesn't get enough time to settle down with certain characters. Like, you feel like a lot of them just kind of go by quickly, and you wish it would just take a little more time to really, like, settle down with certain people and let the story just kind of move. But it feels like it's moving a little too fast. Like, it kind of, you know, is really just, like, rushing to get to the next point. That's on the George side, but on the Rita side, I just didn't really feel like there was ever really that moment where it's like she's really missing her son. I feel like that was like really necessary. I mean, she's just trying to move on, live her normal life despite everything happening. But I think like the real emotional connection in this movie is the relationship between mother and son. And, you know, you see like the son really realizing he wants his mom, but you don't really feel the mom want her son as much. And not that I'm saying like she didn't, I'm just saying like it didn't really feel like the movie gave enough attention to that to really make it impactful in the moment and really like, you know, see that that's in the background of her mind the whole movie. And I think the big issue in this movie for a large bit of it is that the stories don't converge. Like, you know, if they were building towards something or you could feel their connection at a distance between Rita and George, it would have gone a long way. But you just don't really feel like they're actually like gonna crescendo. Like, it doesn't really feel like it's building towards anything significant. It just feels like they're on their separate journeys. Maybe they'll cross paths at the end, but you're just not totally sure. And the pacing is pretty bad as a result of this. It just slogs a lot of the time and seems to be meandering until the next big moment in the story. That's probably what I mentioned about, like, you know, George's character just kind of meeting a lot of different people. It just feels like it's meandering a lot of the time until it would just eventually, like, have this next big plot beat where things get crazy and then you have to move on to the next thing. And I don't know, just to me, none of the acting really stood out either, unfortunately. Nobody's, like, bad, but, you know, everyone is fine, but I wasn't really moved by anyone in particular, which was disappointing because I think Saoirse Ronan especially is a really great actor. And, you know, there's a lot of good actors here, just most of them didn't really leave a mark. Even the score didn't stand out much to me, which is disappointing. It's Hans Zimmer. It has a few nice pieces, especially in the final scenes, but it's just kind of there a lot of the time. It mixes with the sound design and sounds good, but there's no memorable themes or motifs. It just, again, like the acting, it didn't leave a mark to me. It's not something I can really take away. Really, what I'm taking away most from this movie are those really big, like, wartime scenes where, you know, bombs are going down, people are getting, like, in danger, and it's scary. Those moments are really impactful and leave a mark. The rest of this movie doesn't really do that. And it's really just a movie that could have been so much more, but it's kind of dull and underwhelming for a lot of it. There are these great scenes throughout, but none of it was enough to pull me into the story like I hoped it would. I just didn't really feel that invested in what was happening, and I wanted to. I kept, like, really hoping the movie would pull me in, but it just didn't really do that. It seemed to be reaching for some big reactions in this film, but by the end, I didn't really feel anything, and that was very disappointing. I was really hoping to come out of this movie, you know, saying it was an awesome film, one of the best of the year, totally, like, going to be up for awards this season, but I don't really think it does that. I don't really think it's a film that lived up to what it could have been, and I'm just very disappointed with it. I'm going to give it a C. It's mediocre. It's not bad. It's just not good either. It's a very mixed bag. But once again, if you do want to check out Blitz, it'll be on Apple TV Plus pretty shortly, and you can check it out from there if you're interested. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.